Well, hey, everybody. I am Holly Tate. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Vanderbloemen. And as you know, we have been doing a Facebook Live series on the conversation of reopening your church. And that's going to look different for everybody. And that's the beauty of this country that we live in and all of the different churches around the country, from churches of 50 to churches of 50,000. It's going to look different for all of us, but we're just wanting to have the conversation of how do we pray through this really delicate but important conversation of reopening or regathering our churches when that time comes. And we've done so many of these, but don't tell William Vanderbloemen or Sutton Turner, but I think this one might be my favorite because I get to hang out with some friends that live in my world of communications and marketing, and have really handpicked each of these folks today. We might have one more person join us. Justin Brackett got pulled into a last minute meeting. We all know how that is as church communications folks. Our job sometimes requires what we call at Vanderbloemen ever increasing agility. You just got to go with the flow, especially during COVID-19. But he might pop in as he can today so that we can hear from him on the Lakewood team. But want to also let you guys know that we at Vanderbloemen call the small and mid-sized churches, we call you the normal sized churches. And so we know a lot of you that are watching today, you are your comms director, you are your associate pastor, you are your connections pastor, you are all of the things. And so we hope that you get just as much out of this today as our communications directors that are at churches of 3,000, 5,000 and beyond. This is for all of us as we learn from each other and with each other. So make sure you put your comments in, your questions in the comments below. You can put your comments there too. Would love to hear what you're thinking throughout. My team is going to be sending me your questions so we can make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A. But I want to introduce you to our panel who we have here. So Katie Allred, let's start with you. If any of you are in the church communications group or not, you probably know who Katie Allred is. So Katie, if you'll just give us a quick sentence of who you are, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Mobile, where I teach software development and marketing. I also founded a little tiny group called Church Communications. It's been serving so many churches really, really well, which is awesome. God's really done a really amazing work through it. It's churchcommunications.com. It's the website that supports it. And then I also formerly worked at Brentwood Baptist Church in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a mega church there, and worked there for 5 years.
It's awesome. We're so glad you're here. And Katie and I are in a mastermind together.
Oh, yes.
So it's been fun to learn from you, Katie, and so thankful for our friendship. All right, Seth Muse, you are the man of multitasking. So tell us about you, how you serve the church, and all that you do.
Gosh, the man of multitasking, the man of drowning under multitasking. Yeah, I've been in communication for almost a decade now in the church space and marketing space. Worked at a large church, was the communication director there here in North Texas, in North Dallas area. And then now I'm entrepreneurial and I always kind of have been, but I've started my own agency called 8-Bit Communications, and I'm serving businesses and some churches and helping with communication needs, websites, SEO, social media management, just general strategy, and doing some things with church communications as well, and working with a few other people in our space just that have their own stuff going on and need some help. So kind of a content marketer at heart, more content creator, and just really I'm thankful to be connected to so many of these wonderful people that are represented here.
Absolutely. Well, and Seth too, I'm so grateful for your perspective that you bring from a global perspective as well as a practitioner, but you also attend a church of about 100, right now?
Yeah, we are a mobile church that is a pop-up every Sunday in a school. So there's about 100 of us, and we live right here in our little neighborhood, and there's one across the street that it's actually in. And it took the name of that neighborhood, Providence Village Church. And so right now we are not meeting anywhere. We have no office, we have no building. The schools are government buildings, they're gone. So it's been a really interesting time for us.
I can only imagine. I can't wait to hear more about that today. Well, Taquanda, welcome. We're so glad to have you. I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell us your story and where you serve at your church.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Again, my name is Taquanda. I am the Communications and Experience Director at the Faith Experience Church in Detroit, Michigan, where I absolutely love this place. And it is 63 degrees, as I was telling you guys earlier. So we're forward for warm weather today. But when I am not with my lovely Faith Experience family, I actually serve as the social media strategist for Eastern Michigan University. I've been in the industry, like my colleagues, for over 15 years, and absolutely love doing public relations, communications, and digital marketing for brands. But specifically, my heart lies on the faith experience, and then also the higher ed sector. So that's my story. I started off actually as a volunteer doing communications for over 18 years for a mega church here in the area. And then once I'm actually part of a church plant. Faith Experience is a church plant. And we've been running, it'll be 2 years in September. So I transitioned from being a volunteer to being on the lead team, and it's been smooth sailing since.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful for your perspective, not only from the church experience, but also for the higher ed, because we have a lot of higher ed folks that engage with us at Vanderbloemen, since we serve Christian higher ed institutions. And so I'm grateful for your perspective. And it's been so good to get to know you over the last week or so as we've been talking about this panel. So I'm really grateful, that you're a part of it. All right, Kelly, you are at one of our church clients, Grace in Orlando. We've known each other for a couple years now, and it's just been so awesome to see you thrive and really help make Grace what it is. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and talk about what you do at Grace.
Awesome. I am actually the director of experience at Grace Church. We're in Orlando, Florida, where when it's 63, that actually means it's cold and we get out our sweaters. We have about 2,500 people, but we're meeting in 3 local campuses, and they run the gamut. One is larger and has its own facility. One is more medium size, and one is smaller, and those 2 meet in schools. So we also have the pop-up portable experience as well. So
awesome. Well, we're so grateful that you're here, Kelly, and can't wait to hear what you've been learning through all of this. You guys at Grace have been doing some really cool stuff like donut drops and engaging with folks in really creative ways. So Katie, I want to start with you and just kind of hear your perspective. You literally get to hear from over 20,000 church communicators of all different size churches around the country and even world in the Facebook group and your church communications community. What are you hearing just as far as the questions that are being asked and the challenges that church comms folks are facing right now as during COVID-19, but then also as they're thinking about how in the world do we even begin the conversation of reopening?
Yeah, people are still really confused about how to live stream or like what's the best situation about live streaming. I don't think those questions have slowed down any. I kind of wish that they would, but at the same time, I understand that like it is a major focus right now. I think the thing that we really need to pivot though to and focus primarily on is community. I don't think churches understand that they are uniquely positioned right now to provide community in just amazing ways, because I can get a great sermon and like, honestly, like people are looking for the message of hope, of course, but what they're really needing right now during this isolation is community, right? And they can get the message of hope through the gospel, right? We know that life change happens in the context of relationship. And so the church is so uniquely positioned to provide this community and to like get neighborhoods to meet, but online in different ways than they've ever even considered. And so I am just intrigued by what we can do by getting people to come out of their homes, by staying in their homes and coming online. It's actually something I have like been praying for years is, hey, can we just figure out how to do this community online situation? Because people will take down their walls a little bit online, where in the past, like even in person, like this would be more difficult for me. I know that seems weird, right? But like it would be. But like online, we just are so uniquely poised. I can get great worship from Spotify. I can get a great message. I can listen to Andy Stanley on whatever podcast thing I want. But the church is so uniquely positioned about community in such a unique way. I think that's what we need to try to focus on and pivot to. How does church provide community in this space, in this time?
Absolutely. That's so key, Katie. And that's one of the things that I love about you is your passion for. It's not just about views on a sermon. It's not just about downloads on a podcast. Church is about community, both offline and online. And we can help offline by doing it really well online.
Right.
So,
It can start online and then become an offline situation, become an offline relationship. But honestly, if you don't start on online, a lot of times those people never come to your offline situation. And so it's and this is a great time to do it. Like if you've ever thought like, I'd love to start an online ministry, like this is the time, you know? And a lot of people never even consider the internet a place to share the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it is ripe, like ready for the gospel. But the question is, and I think the thing we have to change about our mindsets is that it really is about creating relationships. Social media is social. Okay.
Yes.
It is about having conversations, starting. And I know people are like so afraid of trolls. They're so afraid of like, well, first off, if you're in a Zoom situation, most of the time people aren't going to be trolls. Like that just seems like a weird, I mean, there are weird pop-ins that have been happening on Zoom, but like for the most part, people aren't going to be like, you know, they're at this point, they're just so desperate for community that it's so funny. I said that in like a talk like 5 years ago and people were like throwing tomatoes. They were like, nobody cares about online community.
And now you're like, we are here. It's time.
I was like, I mean,
yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm desperate for online community. Maybe I'm just a crazy person. But anyway, yeah, it's funny.
No.
I did an online test the other day and it said my number one gift was prophecy. And I was like, what?
Hey, watch out. Watch out. We better listen to what Katie says on this Zoom video today. But I want to actually throw it over to Kelly because what you just said, Katie, is so important about the community aspect. So Kelly, I would love to hear from you. Your title is Director of Experience. And so how do you feel like what Katie's been saying about community and communications online, how do we bridge that gap of communications and experience? Are they related? What does that look like for you in your opinion and how you serve Grace?
Yeah, I was the director of communications for a really long time. And so in fact, up until last year, but my title changed this year. We shifted the position a bit because really first of all, we see communication as care. That's like our ultimate philosophy. Like communication is caring for people. It's the way you care for people well. And so we wanted to kind of shift our whole structure so that communication was not just something on screen or online or our printed material, but it's really the whole experience that people have at our church, you know, in our spaces and with people from our church. And so our space, volunteer systems, they tell the story of who we are and what we believe about Jesus and what we think about the church. And so just transitioning into this experience has actually completely, you know, unknowingly, I'm not a prophet like Katie, so I did not know we were not going to be meeting this year, but, you know, it's prepared us to think this way as far as we go online. And it prepared us to really kind of get to the core of what we want people to do and how we want people to engage. And then it doesn't matter it matters because the church's nature is to gather and man, can we not wait to get back. But we want people to have the grace experience or really what we believe is a foundational Christian Jesus experience in these online spaces just as much as we do in our real spaces, our present spaces. So
that's awesome. And Kelly, how are you doing that? Like, let's get practical for a minute, because I really want to dive into the practicality of, from a communications perspective, how are you providing that grace experience online?
Well, I think we've done a few things. Like we've tried to kind of reach the whole gamut. First of all, we were not streaming when we started this. So that was a huge shift for us. In like 36 hours, we created a totally online experience that did not exist before. And we actually see that as a blessing. We were not streaming before because we don't disagree with it, or we think it's theologically weird or something like that. It's just more logistics and systems. And so we were able to kind of think out of the box and develop something that's new and a little bit more intimate, I think, than if we had just flipped the switch and done from the stage again. So that's like the global way, but we've been able to actually dive down into our communities. We shifted some classes that were going online. We have started having what we call an online foyer through Zoom after the services on Sunday. So that's actually the thing that we point people to. We were making mistakes, I think, earlier, asking people to do a lot of things online, but we've really just drilled down to like, if you want to get connected, if you want to talk to people, if you want to pray with people, if you want to see a face and you haven't in 6 weeks, get into this online foyer, and we'll have people in there who will direct your needs from there. And of course, social, we've created groups we didn't have. We've done things we've never done on social, from anything from contests to, different kinds of hashtag campaigns and things like that to connect people.
That's awesome. That's the first time I've heard of the idea of the online foyer. That's fantastic. Taquanda, I want to transition to you as a church plant. You guys are how many folks again on average before COVID?
Yes, before COVID, we were sitting at about a 500 and up type of. So for a church plant who's only, as I say, been in the game for 2 years, like that's a blessing.
That's a lot. Yes,
that's a lot. So yeah, that's how many people we average weekly. So
for a church of about 500, what are your primary ways of communicating with your congregation?
Yeah, so of course we utilize social media a lot. We actually just recently, due to COVID, like we've transitioned. We were doing like a slow rollout as far as our student ministries and things like that, having social outlets. But then we just went full force one day and was like, it is what it is. Like, let's just see how it rolls. But besides that, we also use, of course, our beloved Texan church, and we use everything from e-blast and such. So we kind of leave no stone unturned when it comes to communicating, especially because our audience ranges. We're very, as I always say, intergenerational, right? So yeah. We have the older congregants, and then we have younger congregants too, and young families specifically. So we try to make sure that we're doing that. And then we also have a couple of Facebook groups. So we try to make sure that we're funneling information through there as well.
That's fantastic. That's a lot to keep track of. What does your team look like? Do you have a team of volunteers that help you manage all of that? What does that look like for you guys?
Well, I think our we call it our strategy team, which is our core leadership team, does a really great job, especially when interacting with what we call our X team, our experience team, which is pretty much our auxiliaries. Like all in all, like, yeah, you might have the music department and everything else, but everybody's part of the X team. So communicating with the leadership of those particular teams in order to funnel the information has been a blessing for us. And we've been able to connect with them in that way. And as far as myself, as far as staff is concerned, it's just me. And then, of course, our video director, and then our media person who handles all of our graphic design and creative needs and stuff. So as far as staff is concerned, that. But as far as volunteers is concerned, we have at least about 3, 2 on social. And then we have about 7 now when it comes to church online. And that just literally was within the last week. So
well, and Taquanda, I mean, what you're describing, I think, is so important for people to hear right now, because I mean, you guys are 2 years in, and what you just described, the majority of your staff are online focused. And we have a lot of folks that are watching today who are looking at their org chart, and the roles that have been on their org chart for 10, 30, some of our clients are over 100 years old that have been there, now needs to be looked at and gone, okay, do we need this role that maybe isn't as relevant now. And now we need to have a video director full-time on staff because we're doing so much online content. So your perspective there is really helpful of how you guys are prioritizing the online staff support roles that are so critical to being able to bridge that gap between online and offline.
Yeah, and the interesting part even to that is that we're not all full time, so we all still have our own, full-time jobs. Like our video director actually works for one of the major city news stations here in Detroit.
Yeah.
So you can imagine splitting the time, right, to ensure that the ministry has what they need, and then ensuring that the city has what they need.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
but our pastor has done a great job at looking at our org chart and consistently changing things as needed. And even though, something might be tentative and you may have this assignment for the next, 6 months or something like that, but he knows that if there's a shift that needs to be made, he's willing to make it. And we're just willing to flow with it. And I think that's really important as far as staff and volunteers are concerned.
That's awesome. We're getting some awesome questions coming in. But Seth, before we dive into some questions, I want to hear from you. As far as we were just talking right before this, of you're about to be a part of a leadership team meeting later on this week about the conversation of reopening. So and you also have a global perspective of your consulting that you do and working with church communications. What are the biggest questions or things that leadership teams are thinking about right now as they begin to broach the conversation of reopening?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that I've talked to, it's how much of this are we going to keep doing? How is this going to work with when we quote, get back to normal? And I think that part of the truth of what's happening next is that we're not going to get back to normal. And so churches are trying to figure out, like, we've got all these digital things we've been doing, we've been investing in, we've been trying to figure out how to do these well. I can't wait till we don't have to do this anymore. And it's like, that's not, I mean, for like 5 to 10 years, honestly, we've been growing in this area already and kind of been doing some of these things. And now it's like this slam together from pastoral leadership and technical communications marketing people to just have to come together. And I think that one of the big questions, Taquanda actually talked about this, is how are we going to staff this position to make it really quality and make it good for people? How much training needs to go into our pastoral staff now to learn how to run Zoom meetings for their small group network, or having home groups? Does every home group need to have someone in the group that has a Zoom account or Skype account, that everyone has that link that you can log in? If you can't be there physically, can you come in with Skype or with Zoom? And I think those are the kinds of questions that just these two halves of kind of what's been church in the last 10 years have got to come together and really answer those questions. And so I think for church leaders, whether that's pastors, executive pastors, whatever, elders, you really need to identify those people that kind of know that part of the equation and become their best friend, and really start to work together on how we can add these things into that personal experience, because I don't think any of us expect to replace any of that. We all want that too. I miss church, man. I miss going. I miss seeing people. I miss shaking hands. And so I think most of us do. But I've also, for a long time, like Katie, been talking about, like, we got to add this stuff in. It's so important. It's where we live. And I think when we're talking about reopening, we've got to start asking those questions about everything we do. If we have a next steps class, is there also a digital alternative? If we have small groups, a digital way to have those too. If we have live stream, is that the best thing we can provide online for a Sunday experience in worship? Can we do things during the week? Does it have to be Sunday? What else could we add to our list of content creation? I mean, all those questions are like, we're realizing as church as a whole now, we can reach people online all week in so many different ways. And it's like, if ever there was a time for us to kind of look up and go, there is a right mission field in front of us, it's the digital space. And so involving that in our theology, in our methodologies, and how we're looking at how we do ministry, we've got to fuse that together with the in-person experience, because people live their lives online. They do.
That's so good. That's awesome, Seth. Okay, so Kelly, I have a question for you, but then Katie, I'm teeing you up for after Kelly. So because these two questions build on each other. So Kelly, you sit on the leadership team at Grace. And so one of the things I want to address is there's a bit of tension that seems to always be there between creative teams or communications teams and senior leadership. And I really personally don't believe it has to be that way. And I think that this experience that we're having, William Vanderbloemen, our founder and CEO, said on our Facebook Live yesterday about reopening the small and mid-sized churches. One of the trends he said that he's seeing now and believes that we will continue to see is that the communications director, or whatever that might be, like Kelly, your title as the experience director, will be on the leadership team, because it will be such a critical part. Integrating the online to offline and offline to online will be such a critical part of the rhythms of the church, that person that thinks that way needs to be on the leadership team to make sure that that strategy and care, to use your word, Kelly, is there. So my question for you, Kelly, is how can leadership teams, because this might be a new idea. There's a lot of churches out there that look at the communications department as a service department, not as a strategic department, not as a leadership department. So how should senior leadership teams be thinking about how to develop and support and serve the communications team as we begin the reopening process? And then Katie, what I want you to be thinking about while Kelly is responding is, how can the communications team support the senior leadership team as we begin to think about the reopening process? So Kelly, I'll let you take it away from a senior leadership perspective.
That's a big question.
It is.
I think that it's absolutely critical that communications has a seat at the larger table now of leadership. I think, as I said earlier, like that's the reason my job shifted, is like everything we do is communications. So we better be saying the same thing and accomplishing the same thing across the board, or we're not going to be as effective. And honestly, we're going to waste our time and wear ourselves out. And so I feel like from the leadership side, maybe from the pastoral side, really developing a sense of communication as being the way that you care for people, being the way that you involve people and engage people and speak to them is such an important part to develop on the leadership side. I think on the communication side, we need to realize that what we're doing ultimately is teaching. And so I think that if we come through those bridges, that we can find a lot of common ground. We always start with teaching. What are we trying to teach people to do? Whether that's how to get through our building or the way to think, something to think about the sermon this week, or something to think about how they should live their life out in Christ. And so if that message can work its way from communications into leadership, and then the care aspect can work its way down from leadership, I think be a lot more successful at working together and releasing people to do, what they're good at and in the same focus and goal.
And that's so good, Kelly, because as we think about reopening, there are going to be so many things that we have to communicate that we've never thought about before, like entrances. There might be, I was just looking, tomorrow we have a Facebook Live specifically for executive operations and facility management. And some of the plans that I'm seeing come through are, you're not going to be able to enter the church at every entrance that you used to.
No.
And that's going to be a new thing we have to communicate.
Right.
Or the distance that you're going to have to sit apart, or are you going to have to wear your masks, or where is going to be the hand sanitizer stations? I mean, all of those things. And rather than the leadership team having those conversations and then at the last minute throwing it over to the communications team to try to figure out how to do that well, and everything feeling rushed at the last minute, I think, to your point, if the leadership team can involve the communications team early and be a part of what that rollout looks like, I think we'll see that process be a lot more effective. So Katie, Kelly, go for it. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's okay. We're going to do, what we'll do is we'll do a walkthrough, and we'll have a task force of several people from several different teams. And we're trying to develop a strategy from parking lot to parking lot, like coming in, coming out. And if you walk through those spaces, like physically walk through them, stop every place that you have a question. That's a sign or that's a person. So those are the ways that you answer that and help guide people through your space coming back. And it'll be big work. It'll be a lot to do to make people feel comfortable.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. All right, Katie. So Kelly talked about from a leadership perspective, how to involve the communications team to try to get ahead of the reopening conversations. But how can the communications teams, what should they start talking about or bringing to the leadership team now to help support them to get ready for reopening?
Yeah, I was just writing some notes because I was like, man, it's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we really have to think about is grace. There needs to be grace for both the senior leadership team and the communications team. Something I just like wrote down, and I was just thinking about, I was like, don't rush. Like, we had to rush to get into this, but we don't have to rush to get out of it.
Yes.
Like, we had to rush because there was an emergency. And there's still an emergency. We've never done this. I mean, we haven't done it. I mean, we did it during the 1918, but nobody wrote like a church manual for it back in the day. Right? Like nobody was like, let's put together a PDF back in 1918, you know? And I mean, they had to like stop church too, right? And so, or a lot of places did. And so now we're just trying to figure out like, what does that look like? And, you know, I think it's just gonna take time. I think how beautiful it is that we can do house churches. The thing is that the ways we were doing church in the last 10, 20 years hasn't necessarily always been working, right? We've seen this slow decline in church attendance. And so I'm wondering, will this help us propel ourselves into a new place where we can increase church attendance by increasing community, by increasing our ability to reach out to people and find those who are vulnerable, find those who are isolated, and then also having those people who are isolated coming to us probably for the first time ever. You know, in communicating, you know, to your senior leadership that, yeah, we rushed into this, but now let's be innovative. Let's take some time to think about exactly, I want to get back in the church building too. I think a lot of people think, the online person, she just wants us to stay on the internet for no, I love the church. I was raised in a church of like 100 people. I miss Miss Linda kissing me on the face. You know, like I miss that too. Okay. Like I'm not, you know, not the anti, in my church, like at home, you know, just figured out the internet the other day. So like,
Awesome.
You know, I was raised in a church where you literally could not get, I think they just got like data out there the other day. Like it just happened. So I get it, you know. I really want to be back together too, but until we can, like we have to come up with these innovative ways of doing church, whether that is through home churches or whatever. There needs to be a plan. I know that each state is coming up with their own plans about how things can work, but your church needs its own plan. That goes along with those phases of what rolls out. Don't defy your government. Like, I think, you know, we should listen to what our leaders are telling us to do and then go along and encourage your senior leadership to like think differently. It doesn't have to be your pastor streaming directly Sunday morning. It can be a different setup, right? The house churches in Acts look different than the churches that we have today. And I think that we can go back to a similar setup for now until we can meet together as a larger congregation again. And I think we're going to have to probably for a little while. And so just encouraging your pastor, like he, you know, and the senior leadership team that they're doing the right thing, you know.
That's great.
And so, and giving yourself grace both ways, I think that's going to be really important.
Well, and one thing to just encourage all of our church communications folks that are watching today, we often as communications folks are the first ones to hear the questions that our congregations are asking, because we're the ones that are monitoring the, you know, the inbox, the info or, you know, contact us inbox. We're the ones that are monitoring social media and see the responses to our emails that go out. And so I think it's really helpful to create a feedback loop to our senior leadership team. If you feel like your leadership team maybe feels a little bit stuck or doesn't quite know how to even begin this conversation, since it can't look like the way it did 3 months ago. It's hard for them to wrap their brains about what it can look like next. Bring those questions that people are asking to your leadership team as a way to just start the conversation. I think would be really helpful. All right, Taquanda and Seth, I want to dive into some really tactical advice here. We are getting questions specifically about social media. So Taquanda, you are a champ at social media. You do it for a living, and even your Instagram stories about this panel, I was loving seeing that. So how can you help answer this one? I love this question. How can we pull ministry leaders into the social media space, helping them to understand the value of engaging new followers online? As a one-person comms team, I cannot manage that. So yeah, how do you involve your team, whether it's leaders or whether it's volunteers, to really help engage and to Katie's point, build community online as a church?
So I think it starts with ownership in a way, like showing them that they too can have ownership in this thing. And then also, I love what Katie said about having grace, right? And then knowing that what you can control and what you can't control. I think a lot of times our leaders get so bottled down with, I have to, do all of this, X, Y, and Z, da, 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 da. But when you come to them and say, hey, what works well for you? Like prime example is, our pastor is big on 12 o'clock, right? So he knows that 12 o'clock, he can shut down everything he's doing and cater specifically to whether it's his audience, like right now he's doing a Facebook Live on his, but he caters to his audience on his page at 12. And then also like the church's page on Fridays at 6, because he knows that he can be consistent at that time, and that exactly works with him. And I think that that's key first, is realizing like what your leadership can handle and not giving them too much, because us as communicators, we can go on and have 50 million time frames and nothing phases us, and we're multitasking, and that's great. But when we think about our leadership and everything that they have to do and what's placed in front of them, you just have to be realistic on what their schedule looks like. And then also emphasize the importance of community and how people want to hear, and they want a relational pastor. They want folks who are going to, lead, even not just our pastors, but also our regular leadership. Like one of the things that I did was I stepped into our Facebook group and did a live, like real random. And I started calling people out like I was doing the live on my page. And I was like, hey, Crystal, how you doing, Ronita? Great to see you, Justin. And it was just that aspect of, community and outreach is one, knowing exactly what your schedule looks like, what your leadership schedule looks like. Two, finding ways to be relational, to connect with those first time folks. So another thing that our ministry has done is after pastor gets through preaching, sometimes, especially on Wednesdays, like he might do a special message on live, like he'll come back, he'll leave for about 5-10 minutes, whatever, then he'll come back online again and answer any questions and sit there and just have a conversation with people. And folks like that. But first and foremost, like you got to look at your schedule, and you got to look at your leadership schedule and know what works for them and have realistic conversations. So if they say, oh yeah, I can go live 3 days a week, can you really? Like, can you really?
Yes.
What can you be consistent with? And then, go from there and realize that, okay, hey, he may not only be able, or she may not only be able to do one live a week. That's all right. Go bomb at that one live a week. And then even think about, the use of stories as far as Instagram is concerned. Like, hey, ask open-ended questions. Use that opportunity to get a hold, even in your regular, feed post. Use open-ended questions in order to figure out exactly who they are and where they're chiming in from, whether it might be watching the service live or watching a replay or whatever the case may be. And I think that's what would help our leadership as far as giving them the tools that they need in order to be successful, first and foremost, knowing what they can handle.
That's great, Taquanda. I love that idea of tailoring it. It doesn't have to be the same across the board. It's, hey, what works best for you, and how do we involve that into our overarching strategy? So Seth, here's a question that I think is really important. And since you kind of have a global view, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, especially for churches that are smaller churches. how do you differentiate enough to cut through the mass amount of information that is out there? So any advice for how churches and congregations can really cut through all the noise that seems to be out there, especially on Sunday morning when you're scrolling through your feed and it feels like 50 bajillion churches. How can they think about that?
Well, I think this might be a really good time to try some new things in that area. Like you said, every church is trying to do Facebook Live. Everyone's trying to stream to YouTube Live. It might be time to really try out what you can do with Instagram, upgrade to a texting service instead of just email. It's time to really try to connect with people. And I think the divide and conquer mentality has worked well for us. Is that I know that our staff, at our church, we have really 1 or 2 staff members that are actually paid on staff. And then we have a lot of elders who are very involved in ministry. And so they've divided up our role among them each week. And I get a text from somebody in leadership every week from our church. And right now it's just kind of like, how you doing? Let us know if we can do anything. But today I got one that said, hey, did you know we create a lot of kids resources? And here's the link to that. And that's really helpful for a lot of parents. So I think one of the ways you really can cut through is first you try new things that you're not doing currently and try to go somewhere where there's not noise. But where there is noise, I think you really have to focus on what would be the most helpful. And that it's stuff like you're answering the felt need question for your people, right? You're looking at what do they feel right now? They're lonely, desire for community. A lot of parents don't know what to do with their kids. And I think for pastors, one of the struggles we face on staff is that we're actually having to hand off a lot more spiritual leadership than we used to parents and people in the home. And they're kind of learning like, oh my gosh, I've really leaned on the church to do this. I know that many of us, even in staff who are on staff, are like, wow, we've really leaned on the church to kind of train our kids spiritually. And now we're like, what do we do? And so providing resources and things that answer that felt need are really important. So I think you just have to you have to listen online and then respond to the things that are most prevalently felt. Is that a word? I think it's a word. They're prevalent.
I like it.
Yeah. The most important things, and find out how to address those things, because when you do that, it will cut through the noise. They'll find it. It's like, that's what they want to have help with, and they will share that with friends. And that will be what gets passed around, instead of the things you'll find on TikTok or whatever that are silly memes and junk like that distract us during a time like this. But there's a lot of stuff out there. And if you really want to connect with your people, you have to address things that they're going through right now. It is not the time to really go into like your favorite theological thing. It's time to really go and like apply that, but find a way to tie it into how you're helping them get through some of this time. And I would say, stop saying we're in this together. Stop saying we're getting through it. We are. Let's just do that. That message is on every commercial right now. It's kind of becoming noise as well. Now we just need to see you helping and doing things. And so I think that should be second nature for a pastor, is to recognize, wow, there's a need here. Let's see how we can meet it. You just have to go through digital now instead of in person. So really nothing's changed in that respect, is that you're still doing what you're gifted at. You just have to find a way to get it to them. And that's where you can lean on your communications marketing people to really help you do that. I think as a communicator, the last thing I'll say is that for communicators, we can really provide resources for pastors to share, because right now content creation is pastoring in a way. It's like, you don't have to go live. It's great if you do, but if you just make something and share it, that feels like you're ministering to them, feels pastoral, feels like you're present. And that's very foreign to those that are not used to the digital space. And so as you make things for people that answer those felt needs, you're actually pastoring when you're not even there, which is weird.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of get used to that. So communication directors, graphic designers, we can make things for pastors, send it to them, say, share this on your personal, share this on these, and that way they don't have to make and feel that pressure of making all this stuff they don't know how to make.
That's great.
Hey, Katie.
Super helpful.
Can I sidebar off of what Seth was saying? I think it's really cool how you were talking about like the resources that you have. Like I always say, you know, what's in your house, right?
Mhm.
And knowing like literally like what's in your congregation. Like one of the things that we did was we knew that we had somebody who was a part of our X team who was bomb at homeschooling. She had homeschooled all three of her kids, and her husband just so happens to be in the video space, and he set up her camera and she went at it and gave us about 5 to 7 tips on homeschooling. And every week we sent that out, you know, whether it was through social or whether it was through e-blast, just so that those parents who were feeling overwhelmed with the fact that, okay, I just went from having a full-time job away from my kids, now I got a full-time job at my house and my kids is right next to me. Like,
Yeah.
how do you really, you know, handle all of those type of things? And I think like content like that, right, like helps our leadership be in a position to do exactly what Seth said, and that's honestly ensuring that, you know, our pastors are able to pastor.
So good, Taquanda. That is fantastic. I love that. Leveraging the resources that you have in your congregation and might not even be on your staff, living into that. I also want to add one thing to what Seth said, but while I'm doing that, I want all of you guys to think about, we're getting lots of questions about tools and recommendations. So I'd love for each of you to think about your top 2 tools that you could not live without. Like as a church communications person, what are your top 2 favorite tools that help you be the best church communicator you can be? And while you're thinking about that, and Kelly, I'm going to start with you, so get ready. And while you're thinking about that, Seth, you said something that I really loved, and that was you have to listen online. So one of my mantras is that the best marketers and communicators are the best listeners. It is not about having all the answers or having knowing the right thing to say or how to say it. It's listening to what your congregation needs. And so I really appreciate that you said that. All right, Kelly, I know I'm putting everybody on the spot, but yeah, I would just love to share, you know, what are your top 2, or even if it's just one, that's okay, resources or tools that help you be the best church communicator you can be?
I'm probably not going to be that innovative with this answer, but I'll try to make it broad. First, I think for us is Slack, which is an internal team communication. It's how we get all on the same page. So whatever tool that you can pull together that you're all on the same page and you're not continually in this conversation and that conversation and this email thread and that email thread, but everyone's sort of talking together about what you want to do and the focus you want to have in this season, this week, this weekend, so you can all be on the same page and we can really leverage people, like you've been talking about, Seth and Taquanda, to get out the content, but all around a central theme. And then I'm just going to have to land on, you know, plain old Instagram, which drives our social to Facebook. We start every conversation that we have there. It's free and fabulous and has a million ways for you to engage people. And they're sitting there. So that's mine.
I love that. We use Slack as well. And what you said is so critical because it's not always about the, you know, fun new social media tool.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have great effective social media strategy if your internal team is not aligned. And so Slack is a fantastic tool to make sure that you're communicating internally and all on the same page, because that's just as important as anything you post externally. So Kelly, those are awesome. All right, Seth, what are your top 2 tools for being a great church communicator?
Oh, well, I was going to say Instagram too, but I'll change so I can do something else.
You can
It's a
take
big one
it.
for me. Big one for me. I spend a lot of time in Trello. That's my project management tool of choice. And I think that coordinating all of your tasks and everything together in one place, whether you use Trello, Asana, Basecamp, whatever, if you've got to have that kind of coherency. Slack is an addition to those things. It's really great. But I love a good project management software that everyone can get into. There's a lot of good free ones that allow a ton of people to come in before you have to pay for it, that you can just organize what's going on, communicate through there. Internal communication, I think, is one of the biggest issues on church staff anyway. And now we're not even in the same building. So it's got to be nuts right now. So finding something like that is incredible. My other go-to, I think, is going to be Buffer. It's a social media scheduling platform. I've been with them for a long time. I pay for their lowest tier to schedule all social media that I have through them. And that way I can sit down and batch social media out.
Yeah.
I haven't done a ton of that recently. I've tried something new, but when I do work for other companies or for churches, I try to go to Buffer because it is by far is my favorite. I know there's others like Hootsuite later, et cetera, but I really love Buffer as a scheduling program. It keeps me organized.
Awesome. Two excellent tools. And yes, project management, you're speaking my love language. That's awesome. All right, Taquanda, what are your two favorite tools?
So I would have to agree about Slack. However, a lot of things can get lost in the sauce with Slack. Channels you could have, and and conversations you're having within it. So I would have to say my main tool is that, and in Google Docs / our Gmail, which is where all of our mail goes through. Of course, I could say, social media and all the platforms and Hootsuite and everything else or whatever. But as far as organization is concerned and what that looks like, and ensuring that everybody has whatever they need, me and Drive are like this.
Girl, me too. I'm a big Parks and Rec fan, the show Parks and Rec, and Leslie Knope on there. I always say, I heard notebooks, like how she had a notebook for everything. That's me with Google Drive. Like there is a Google Doc and a Google Drive for everything. So I love that. You're speaking my language. All right, Katie, what are your top two favorite tools?
I brought back the old paper and pen recently, and I really love it.
Me too. I've got even like the little legal pad.
I tell you what, I have never used a notebook so much in the last 10 years of my life, honestly. I don't know if it's because I'm on the computer so much that I'm not seeing humans that I suddenly have gone back to paper and pen. I was going to say TikTok and try to be ironic, but the TikTok kids are on it. Maybe we should try it. No, I'm just kidding. Golly, I want to be innovative, but I'm not. Zoom, probably. I use Zoom so much. I think the church should try to use it a little bit more. I love my church just launched a virtual Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University that we're doing every week for 6
That's great.
or something. How cool is that, right? And then we all get to meet together, and I'm honestly meeting people at my church I've never met because I'm at a campus, right? So we're all over the place. And so this is great because now we've got people who are mingling across campuses and creating relationships that they would have never had this not happened, right? So I'm kind of really enjoying it. I'm snooping on people on their Facebooks, even though I'm not talking to them. I'm like, that girl looks like she's probably pretty cool in normal life. Maybe we can be friends after this.
Yeah, you're building community. It's exactly what you've been saying. That's excellent.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think that's great. I think a lot of churches are doing that. There's so many innovative tools coming out for live streaming and engagement and stuff. So many. Go and try to find some of them because I think that's going to be a big thing for the next couple of years. So I don't know.
It's great.
It's been interesting.
Well, I've got one more question I'm going to throw to you, Kelly, and then have a little bit of housekeeping before we wrap up. But we've gotten a couple questions about, every state, and even within states, some cities have governance that are saying different things from what the state government is saying. There are inevitably going to be folks who disagree with whatever the decision that the church makes. So how can we gracefully, from communication standpoint, how can we gracefully deal with the pushback or disagreement that there might be? And that goes for whether we decide to go ahead and start reopening or not. There's going to be some folks who are like, why aren't you open yet? And then there's going to be other folks that say, why in the world did you open? So I would just love to hear from you, Kelly, your thoughts on how you're kind of proactively thinking through how to manage some of that pushback or disagreement.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get it. I think we already see people at our church because we immediately called it, and we called it for till a date. We were like, we're out for 8 weeks, and because we didn't want people to think every week, are we coming back? Are we coming back? Are we coming back? So we called it. So we have people now who think after that's over, we're back in, and we're looking at trying to say, hey, that's probably not going to happen. And so, there'll be people who are exciting. There'll be people who are upset. we're going to be all over the spectrum. And I think all we can do, first from a strategic standpoint, is pray about our own situation, what we're doing, plan, and we can't come back. I mean, I love Katie's stuff about not rushing. We have a little time. We don't have to pull the trigger right when they say. We're also going to talk to other churches in our area, connect with them as many as we can. What are you doing? Because I think there's strength in numbers and in making decisions together about whether or not we're going to stay closed or open. But once we decide that, we'll be crazy clear. We'll be crazy clear about everything we're doing to make the church safe. We'll be crazy clear about everything that we're doing when you come back, if you do. And then we'll also be clear about, it's okay if you're a high-risk person or you're not ready. That is totally great. And we're going to still continue this, and this in order to serve you and meet you this time. Like, we get where you are. This is a personal decision, even though we're making a corporate decision, and just really kind of just lay out a plan for each type of person. Ready person, coming back but terrified person, and I'm not ready to step out my door yet for whatever reason, high risk or whatever, but really having a conversation that addresses each one of those emotional places.
Well, and that goes back to what you said at the very beginning, Kelly, and what you're so good at is just, it's all about care. But it's our communication tactics can't come before the person. It's all about the person first. And that's such a great way to think about it. I know that probably triggered a lot of ideas for folks watching of thinking about the tiers of readiness. That is excellent. Well, I want to thank everybody who has joined us today. We've had consistently between 400 and 500 folks watching this. And I know, so Church Marketing University with Ryan Wakefield went live at the exact same time. So I told Ryan I would give him a shout out because he's with Brady, who is with Pro Church Tools. And they are both two smart men. And so you should definitely go over there and watch that if you tuned in for ours, because I know I'm going to go watch his. And then also just want to, Kelly, a lot of people had questions about the foyer idea. So where can they reach out to you if they have questions about how you guys are doing that?
Oh, totally. Just, you can email me at hello@discovergrace.com. So hello@discovergrace.com. Or you can find me, I'm just Kelly Atkins, my name, all one word, on Instagram. You can message me there for more information about that. Glad to hook you up with that.
Great. And then Taquanda and Seth and Katie, all three of these amazing individuals have agencies where they serve churches. And so if you want to connect with them at all, you can literally just Google all of their names and they will come up. And then ultimately everybody who's watching this, no matter what your role is on your staff, needs to join the Church Communications Facebook group. It is a phenomenal community that Katie started so many years ago and is just a vibrant, supportive group of answering questions like this all day, every day, and phenomenal resources. So you got to go join that group. And then we will post, so you can definitely, obviously, this Facebook Live, so you can rewatch this right here on Facebook Live, but we will also be publishing our blog post where we do a recap of this conversation today at reopeningchurch.com. That's reopeningchurch.com, where you can find so many resources all about reopening the church. Tomorrow, our COO, Sutton Turner, is going to be doing a Facebook Live panel of executive pastors of all different shapes and sizes of churches from all around the country. So definitely want to check that out. They're going to talk about phasing in, facility management, all of that. And then on Thursday, we're doing a children and family ministry panel. And so that we've been getting a ton of questions about family ministry, super important, especially the safety. So you'll want to make sure that you check that out. And you can check out all of that at reopeningchurch.com. Katie, Taquanda, Kelly, and Seth, I'm so grateful for each of you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to serve all of these church leaders today. We're so thankful for each of you guys.
Thank you, Holly.
Bye. Thank you.
You're awesome.
Bye, everybody.